In a dystopian world where time has replaced money, everyone stops aging at 25 years old and is given only 1 year to live unless they can earn more time. The rich possess centuries of life, while the poor struggle to survive each day. Will Salas, a hard-working factory worker, suddenly receives more than 100 years from a mysterious stranger, thrusting him into a deadly conspiracy that changes his life forever. After losing his mother to the cruel system, Will becomes the target of relentless timekeepers, while uncovering the shocking truth behind a society controlled by the wealthy elite. Alongside Sylvia, the daughter of one of the richest men alive, he risks everything to fight back, robbing time banks and redistributing stolen time to those who need it most. Meanwhile, in an abandoned building, Will Salas wakes up and finds that the time on his hand has increased to over a century. After noticing a message on the window, he spots the man sitting on the bridge, the same man he saw at the bar after coming home from work the night before. Will Salas is a hard-working man who helps support his family, while his mother, Rachel Salas, still looks remarkably young despite being 50 years old. At one point, she brings up marriage, but Will says he's not ready to settle down yet. Afterward, he asks how much time she has left, and she explains that it's running low because she still hasn't paid the rent and electricity bills. Will suggests taking on a second job, but she quickly warns him that it's too dangerous. She also reminds him to meet her at the bus stop later tonight because she won't have enough time left after paying the rent. Right before he heads out, Rachel transfers him 30 minutes for lunch. As they watch the time transfer between them, he kisses her, wishes her a happy birthday, and heads to work. Soon after, a little girl approaches him asking for time, so he transfers some using her time storage device. After giving away some of his time, Will is forced to run to conserve what he has left. Moments later, at a coffee stand, he learns that the price of coffee has gone up. When Burrell asks about it, the cashier simply doesn't care. In the end, Will buys it anyway. On the way to work, they pass two men dueling while gambling with their time. Soon after arriving at the factory, they come across a man who has already run out of time and died, then notice a timekeeper watching the scene. Hours later, after collecting his paycheck, Will complains that his wages are lower than usual, but the clerk doesn't care, and simply explains that the production quota has increased. Later that night at a bar, Burrell points out a man named Henry Hamilton, who is buying drinks for everyone, and tells him that he has more than 100 years of time. Right then, Will notices someone watching that guy, so he walks over and warns him to leave. However, Henry doesn't seem to care. At that moment, Fortis enters the bar, causing everyone to rush outside. Burrell quickly pulls him away and tells him to leave, but Will wants to stay and watch. So he tells Burrell to go on without him. Meanwhile, Fortis challenges Henry to a duel in an attempt to steal his time. However, he says he isn't feeling well and asks for a moment. After entering the restroom, he immediately throws up in the toilet while one of Fortis's henchmen keeps a close eye on him. At that moment, Will suddenly knocks the henchman unconscious, drags Henry outside, blocks the exit with a dumpster, and helps him escape. Shortly afterward, Fortis and his men chase after them. With no other choice, Will and Henry climb over a fence to escape. Afterward, he forces open a locked door, wraps a chain around it, and holds it shut. Moments later, Fortis and his men arrive and begin checking every door, but all of them are locked. Before long, after making sure no one has found them, they head up to the second floor, where Will immediately scolds Henry. However, Henry remains unfazed, and instead offers him a drink, though Will doesn't like the taste. Following that, Will sees Fortis and his men leave, then tells him to wait until morning. Soon after, Henry asks him how old he really is before revealing his own age. It turns out he has lived for more than a century, which is why he no longer cares about living, as all of his loved ones have already died. He then reveals the truth about the system, explaining that there is enough time for everyone, but the elite keeps raising prices to control the population. Henry then asks him what he would do if he had plenty of time. Will checks the time on his arm before answering honestly, then tells him to get some rest and reassures him that he won't steal his time while he's asleep. So Henry says the same to him before offering another drink. This time, Will realizes it tastes much better than before. The next day, Henry wakes up while Will is still asleep. He quietly walks over to him and transfers all but 5 minutes of his remaining time into Will's arm. Moments later, on top of a bridge, he sits quietly staring into the distance as the time on his arm slowly counts down. Eventually, it reaches 0, and he dies. When Will arrives, he finds Henry's lifeless body and quickly leaves. Soon after, he heads to Burrell's house, asks to speak with him in private, and explains everything that had happened. Before leaving, he transfers 10 years to Burrell as a gift for their friendship anniversary. That night, after finishing work, Rachel plans to take the bus home, only to discover that the fare has gone up. With barely any time left after paying her bills, she hesitates to board. She pleads with the driver, but he's too afraid to help, while the other passengers silently look away. With no other choice, Rachel starts running. Shortly afterward, a truck passes by, but the driver ignores her. Moment later, Will arrives at the bus stop to meet his mother, only to find that she isn't there. Panicking, he sprints against the flow of traffic along the bus route. Meanwhile, Rachel begs for help again, but everyone ignores her as her time runs out. When Will finally spots her in the distance, he pushes himself even harder. But unfortunately, he reaches her just seconds too late, as Rachel runs out of time and dies in his arms. Heartbroken, Will can do nothing but break down in tears. The following day, a limousine arrives to pick him up. The driver only believes him after seeing the time on his arm. To reach New Greenwich, they must pass through several expensive checkpoints, seemingly designed to keep people from the lower zones out. Inside, everything is luxurious, and no one seems to be in a hurry. When Will arrives, he instinctively starts running, but quickly stops after noticing everyone staring at him. At that moment, Sylvia Weiss becomes curious about him, but Will ignores her, walks into a hotel, and rents a room. Eventually, beneath the bridge, the timekeepers led by Raymond Leon discover Henry Hamilton's body. However, they find no eyewitnesses. As he's about to leave, Raymond notices a surveillance camera mounted above the bridge. At that moment, Will has no idea he was caught on camera. They return to headquarters and review the footage, but it provides no evidence that Will killed Henry. Raymond doesn't care, though, and becomes determined to track down his location. Of course, Will has no idea he's being hunted as he eats at a restaurant, while Sylvia continues watching him from a distance. Right then, the waitress brings him the bill, so Will leaves her a generous tip. That night, he heads to a casino. After paying the entrance fee, he picks a table where he meets Philippe Weiss, who becomes curious about him. Soon after, his daughter arrives. It turns out she's the same woman Will saw before entering the hotel. As they play, Philippe raises the bet by 2 centuries. However, Will is confident in his cards, and after calling the bet, he reveals that he has only a few seconds of time left. Moments later, the dealer reveals the cards, and he wins. Then calmly claims his winnings, just moments before his time runs out. After congratulating him, Philippe introduces his daughter Sylvia to Will, where she invites him to a party at her house. The following night, Will drives to her house in the car he bought earlier. Moments later, he meets Sylvia, and the two chat for a while before she asks him to dance. As they dance, Sylvia explains that she knew his true background after seeing him running the day before. After hearing her explanation, Will pulls her away from the party. Outside, he sees the ocean for the first time and decides to swim, then asks Sylvia to join him. Before long, they return, and Philippe invites Will to join a poker game. Just then, the timekeepers arrive and arrest him. Inside a private room, Raymond interrogates Will before ordering his men to leave him with only 2 hours of time. However, the moment Sylvia steps out of the room, he attacks the 2 guards, before rushes outside. There, he spots Sylvia and immediately takes her hostage. Soon after, he jumps into his car and speeds away while the timekeepers chase after him. Despite the pursuit, Will skillfully evades them and hides the car beneath a bridge. The next morning, while they're driving, their car runs over a spike strip, sending it off the road before it finally comes to a stop. At that moment, Fortis and his men arrive, find both of them unconscious, and begin checking their time. One of the men notices Sylvia's time, prompting Fortis to steal it from her. However, realizing the timekeepers are about to arrive, they quickly leave. When they wake up, Sylvia realizes she has only half an hour left, so Will immediately transfers some of his time to her before they leave. Shortly afterward, Raymond arrives but finds only Will's abandoned car, leaving the timekeepers with no leads. At that moment, they arrives at Burrell's house, only to discover that he has drunk himself to death. It turns out Burrell was a heavy alcoholic, and after Will gave him 10 years, he spent every last second at the bar. Panicking as their time begins running low, he notices Sylvia's earring and decides to pawn it. So they race to a pawn shop and manage to hold the door open just before it closes. However, the owner notices how desperate they are and offers them a very low price, leaving them with no choice but to accept it before splitting the time between them. Moments later, Will calls Raymond and demands a ransom for Sylvia before taking her to his house. On the way, she sees people dying on the streets. When they arrive, it's already night. There, he begins telling her about his father and how he died. That's when Sylvia realizes how corrupt the system truly is, especially after Philippe refuses to pay the ransom when he sees the bank running out of time the next day. As a result, Will decides to let her go and tells her to call her father. However, at that moment he doesn't realize Raymond has arrived. Right then, Sylvia turns around and manages to shoot him. After that, Will takes Raymond's time before they leave. Knowing they will soon run out of time, they decide to rob the rich and steal their car. Soon after, they watch the news and realize they have become fugitives. Will tries to reassure her, but she doesn't seem to care at all. At that moment, while Philippe is working, Raymond visits him and informs him that he has a warrant for Sylvia's arrest, even though Philippe insists she has been kidnapped. He then tries to bribe Raymond, but he refuses, and even warns him not to help his daughter or he will be arrested as well. Elsewhere, Will teaches Sylvia how to shoot. Right then, she tells him how they can get more time. So they crash a truck into a time bank and rob the vault before telling the nearby residents to take as much time as they need. Shortly afterward, Raymond arrives but fails to find them. Over the following days, they continue distributing time to those in need, while Fortis and his men try to steal it and search for the pair by any means necessary. At one point, the person they're looking for tries to escape through a window after noticing the timekeepers have arrived. Will and Sylvia are chased across the rooftops before bribing a bus driver and escaping. The next day, they arrive at a hotel and rent every room, leaving no vacancies for other guests. Later, while they're cuddling, Fortis and his men suddenly barge into the room and begin threatening them. It is then revealed that they have been working for the timekeepers to maintain the balance of time. Before long, Fortis challenges Will to a duel for his time. When the battle begins, Will appears to be losing. However, when Fortis lets his guard down, he immediately turns the tables, takes his gun, and manages to kill all of his men. As Fortis's time begins running out, Will points the gun at him, leaving him with no choice but to accept his fate. Moments later, on the rooftop, Will realizes they can never truly win because the ruling elite will simply keep raising the price of everything. That's when Sylvia suggests stealing 1,000,000 years of time. So the next morning, as Philippe Weiss steps out of his car surrounded by bodyguards, Sylvia pretends to surrender. However, Will suddenly holds him at gunpoint from behind, before she leads them to the vault, where Will opens it and discovers a storage containing 1,000,000 years of time. Before they leave, Philippe warns them that what they're doing will destroy the system, but his words only make Will even more determined to help those in need. At that moment, at Timekeeper headquarters, the monitors show a massive amount of time flowing out of New Greenwich, prompting Raymond to rush out immediately. Meanwhile, Will and Sylvia drive out of the parking garage. Just as Raymond is about to request more time, he spots them and immediately gives chase. At the same time, officers at the checkpoint prepare to stop them after receiving Raymond's orders to shoot on sight. Luckily, their car is bulletproof, allowing them to keep driving despite the gunfire. Moments later, they crash through the checkpoint booth and continue toward Dayton. However, Raymond soon rams their car, forcing it to stop. As soon as Will gets out, he immediately gives the time container to the little girl he met earlier, and she begins distributing it to everyone in Dayton. Because of that, Will and Sylvia manage to escape from Raymond. Unable to catch them, Raymond hijacks someone's car and continues the pursuit. Moments later, they rush toward the checkpoint as their time rapidly runs out. Eventually, Raymond catches up to them, rushes after the pair and manages to block their path. Right then, Will learns that Raymond also came from Dayton. As they talk, Will asks Raymond for some time, only for Raymond to realize that he has run out of time himself. Shortly afterward, he dies. After that, Will and Sylvia prepare to continue their escape, only to notice that they have just seconds left on their clocks. Struggling to make a decision, Will suddenly gets an idea, so they sprint toward Raymond's car. Soon after, Will requests more time before running back to Sylvia. Just like what happened with his mother, he races against the clock. But this time, he reaches Sylvia in time and saves her. Moments later, at Timekeeper headquarters, the monitors show a massive surge of time flowing into New Greenwich as the people of Dayton begin crossing into the wealthy zone. When one of his subordinates asks what to do, the acting chief decides to resign. Meanwhile, Will and Sylvia continue their Robin Hood campaign.